let's introduce our guests from TLMC. Ready, set, go. So we got 3 finalists from the TLMC 11. You know what? So we have Young Gressler, Solstice 245. You there?
Hey there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And PK Lixian.
Hello, hello.
Got them all. Nailed it. Booyakasha. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for being on the show. We're really happy that you guys can make it. All right.
No problem.
So we got PK Lixian, whose map Cyber Forest made it in. Young Wrestlers, am I saying it? Reminiscence?
Yes.
Reminiscence. And Port Alexander. Solstice and had Kairos Junction. Your maps made it into the finalist. So, first of all, congratulations for making it, even though it's not like there's still a couple more steps in the TLMC, but I think this is like, a pretty solid space to be in. I feel like, have either any of you been to the final? Like, have you guys made it to the finals of the TLMC before?
I made it before once, and Young Wrestler as well.
I've been in 4 different ones in a row.
Nice. Sweet.
I'm a new addition.
So yeah, because I was talking to some of the map makers. Avix is my resident map maker that I've always talked to, and he says a lot of the people are new. He's like a lot of the new talent, new blood, who've made it to the for this round in terms of maps. And normally we've talked to a couple of like you obviously the finalists in this time around. You have the music who's had a couple maps prior to as well. And obviously Avex, but there was no -0 didn't have any maps. So there were kind of some faces that were missing, but you guys are up there now. And do you guys find it's nerve-wracking when you're doing the TLMC? Like, does it ever feel stressful?
A little bit. It is kind of for me.
For me personally, I think I've been in so many now. It's just another one, and I try to get my best work out there before I kind of reveal what I have out there. But it's not too stressful anymore.
For me, since I wasn't a finalist before, lately, and I tried last TLMC, but wasn't as good as back then, it's quite nerve-wracking thinking of more original ideas and more original decoration styles.
Yeah.
Any thought for you, Dave?
For me, I'm not nervous about being a finalist at all.
Why didn't you submit a map? You told me.
I should. It would just be completely flat with 2 bases, and I'd call it Final Destination.
Easy.
Yeah.
No items.
Smash Rope. Yeah, exactly.
Fox only.
No items, nothing. Exactly. Zergo. So I was wondering, you just mentioned like decoration style, and I find that's almost, I don't know if I want to say it's a bigger thing now, but like we're starting to see more like new tile sets we haven't, or like at least new coloring that we haven't, new kind of props. One of the maps in the finals looks like a storyboard where it's like blue, yellow, red, and green, like all in different quadrants and stuff. There's a lot more like, it feels like there's a lot more effort going into like the decoration and the appearance of the thing or the feel of it. Is that a big part of the designing process? Do you start with kind of a visual concept, or do you start with almost a blueprint of what the map is and then add the decoration later?
Generally, for what I do is I think about what I want for a map. Like, if, for example, for Cyber Forest, because at the time I was really into Blackpink. And my first map that I submitted, which was originally called Temple Overgrowth, and now it's, that's this new name, Ancient Temple. Really mixed it up. They both have temple. But it had a Blackpink base setup with middle. And this base, I basically did the same thing, but tried a different spin, bigger main and whatnot. And when I was thinking of decoration, it's like, at the time I saw a map called Cyberspace, and I really liked the force field pillars, and I was like, can I put that in a forest? And I put it in a forest.
Makes sense. It does end up looking pretty cool. I don't know if we have maps up anyway. I guess you can't see them yet, but we'll kick into those later.
Yeah, we'll kick into the maps. We'll do like a first little round of questions, and then we'll bounce into the individual maps of each of our map creators here and ask them some specific map questions.
Indeed. And the Kairos Junction one, I think, has a nice juxtaposition on it. It's got kind of the almost city or the higher tech platforms going into like the barren desert sort of thing. What was kind of your inspiration for that, or what sort of thing did you have in mind?
Well, I had done it once before. I think my inspiration was mostly, I'm sure you guys remember Echo from, it's been brought back in Legacy of the Void, and it was a map in Heart of the Swarm. That one's by Cantuva. But yeah, I really liked that, and I wanted to make something that was really similar. And there was a predecessor to this map, which wasn't very good, but I just kind of took the same thing that I did there, and I overhauled it, and it turned out much better in Kairos Junction.
And this one, I think, in the whole contest has the shortest rush distance.
They said the shortest rush distance is standard. I don't think it's the shortest in the whole.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Out of all the finalists, I think some of the challenge maps have shorter distances.
Oh, okay. Was that an intentional kind of thought to really open up? Like the middle's not open, but it is quick. Like it's not like you have to go completely around too big of an obstacle. You can go pretty much ramp to ramp relatively quickly. Was that a big kind of feature to this map?
I'll admit that my design process is not very what's the word? It's not super deliberate. I just
kind of just stumble into it.
Yeah. And then when I find something that I like, then I try to accentuate what I like about it. So like with Kairos, you've got the two smaller chokes, and going through those is the fastest way. But if you got a super big army, you kind of want to go around and approach from the larger chokes so that they aren't the closest.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that it has a quick early game distance, but you wouldn't necessarily want to go through there later in the game.
Oh, I'm actually excited to dive in to see that.
Yeah.
So is that, when you say not deliberate, does that mean you just kind of play around with the tile sets until you stumble onto a part that you like, and then you kind of just elaborate on it?
I don't know. I just kind of do stuff randomly. And I think it's just like I kind of try to figure out like where I want the bases sort of first, and then I sort of fill stuff in afterwards.
Here's something I'm kind of curious, something for everybody here. Then this is I know that a lot of you put a lot of different maps in, and before we had this show, I invited I want to say it's Laziel, probably Laziel or Laziel, who made Ritual Mupi Temple, and his response was that he actually put in 5 maps, and his worst map was the one that won. So do any of you guys experience that a map that you don't like is the one that people pick or the judges pick? And this goes to anybody. Should I put that out?
That didn't really happen for me. Kairos was either my favorite, maybe a close second, but I kind of think it was my favorite.
And then as for me, I think it goes back to when I submitted for TLMC 8 and Defender's Landing got submitted in. And that's when this whole Defenders meme started, is everybody hates that map. And that's when I played on the trick for everybody that, Defender's Resort is the next, bad map. And I thought that was terrible, but they love it. But for this specific TLMC, I think Port Alexander is my favorite map. So, and it finally got in. And then Reminiscence, I thought it was one of my middle maps. Not really my strongest, but it was a middle. So I didn't think any of my weaker maps made it. So
when you said finally made it, like did you resubmit it from a different TLMC or?
yes, last TLMC 10, I submitted Port Alexander to standard, and then I got feedback that it would be better if it went into macro. So this time I submitted it into macro category.
That's interesting. Who gives you that feedback? Like,
It was Cantuva. He messaged me on Discord, and he was just like, "Hey, it was really, really close, but it was in standard, so we had to cut it right before it could make it into the top 16."
That's kind of interesting. I guess I never really thought about this before, but it didn't occur to me that you actually submit it into a category. I just figured that people submit them and then they categorize them. Like, I don't know.
No, that makes sense.
Like, you would think that they would like look at it and be like, actually, that's more a macro map. Put it over there.
From what I heard is they can move it, but they try not to move the maps into different categories.
Because technically, I guess it's part of your skill to know what map you're designing for, or like what category you're designing for. Or at least that's expected.
Yes, I think that's what they're trying to implement.
To enforce. Just that you're expected to know what category you're designing for. So that's an interesting idea. The idea of it that depending on the category you put it in, could completely have a map that may be decent in one category and may just not be good for another, right? So your Alexander, that's Port Alexander. How did you come up with the name with that? That name constantly like sticks into my head as a name, but like
so.
Alexander, go ahead.
When I was creating the map, that's when the announcement for Remastered was coming out, and I was a big Brood War fan. I'd always played it. So I was just looking for names, and I think one of the maps or something along the lines reminded me of Port Alexander, because I think the ship that they were on,
that's the what's his name? Stukov's ship. Alexander.
Yeah, that's the ship that I named it after, because I was just reminiscing. Funny that I named another map something similar to that, but yeah, that's pretty much how the name came to be. And I wanted to do some sort of like fish kind of port map, so I just stuck port in front of it.
Yeah, it really does end up looking like an actual shipping port too. Like it's almost like an abandoned Terran like trade center or something.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that is not my texturing. I could only dream to be that texture savvy. It's AVAX that helped, texture it. So I'd want to thank him, but he's not. I don't think he's here. I don't.
No, he's working today. Yeah.
So, but I'm assuming he'll watch the YouTube or pod.
So with that being said, then, like, does that happen a lot amongst the map making community, where some people will be like, well, I did this map and I'm not really good at texturing, and they're like, would you help me out by texturing this map for me?
I've seen people ask around like, hey, I did this layout. Does anybody have like ideas for it or want to actually texture it? But personally, for me, I don't really try and do that. I try and practice my texturing skills, and I don't know about the other two. They can elaborate on what they do.
Generally, I want to improve my ability to create beautiful scenery and whatnot, because, well, since I'm not really an artist, this is the closest way I can make art without stressing myself out. When I view people just asking and whatnot for people to do their decorations or maps, I just kind of get agitated of, why can't you just do yourself? You won't learn how to do it if you don't go for trial and error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and then for our last, was that Solstice that we haven't heard from, or?
Yeah.
Oh, for me with art, I do it all myself. I feel like I'm pretty good with it. I'm not sure I would say I'm AVEX level, but I like to think I'm pretty good at it. So I do all my own art related stuff, and I'll ask for feedback once in a while for like colors, like on the color scheme or like the lighting or whatever. But otherwise, I'm a solo. I just go it solo.
Here. All right. Well, I'm curious then, when out of all, like, I don't think I got to ask, but how long have each of you guys been making maps? I want to go down the table, starting with Solstice. Like, how long have you been making maps?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on what capacity you, under what capacity you're talking about. Like, if you're talking about like seriously map making, then I'd say at least a few years, maybe started in 2015, but it was probably 2016 when I kind of started to hit my stride. But I played Brood War as a little kid, and I messed around with the editor then too. So, I mean, like, nothing that anybody would want to see, but but I did mess around with. I tried to create my own little scenarios, and I actually did do. I did try to do an arcade project for StarCraft 2. I think it might have been. It was around Heart of the Swarm release when I was doing that, but I don't think it was like a RPG map, but it was really bad, and I generally don't want to talk about it.
Just that traumatizing, eh?
Fair enough.
Well, I don't know if I mean it in a traumatizing way, but like I just kind of look back on it, and I'm just like, wow, how far I've come.
I mean, like, it's kind of like a good thing, because like now, you know, it's one of those things that you can use as a measuring stick from the distance.
Yeah. And one of my building blocks for where I'm at now. So I guess you can't scoff at that.
Yeah, exactly. Young Wrestler, how long have you been making maps?
Well, competitive StarCraft 2 maps, I think I started at TLMC 7 is when I first made my first competitive map. But me and my brother used to make UBS or use map settings maps back in Brood War, and I helped him. It was one of those like level up as you kill more monsters sort of thing and spawn as teams sort of user map settings. So I had a little bit of background in the editor, but not much, and not any in competitive. So I kind of just jumped in. I think was that 3 or 2 years ago now. So it's been a long process of trying to refine like how to get it correctly and get into finals.
And PK, how long have you been?
So I was actually shown the editor by a friend approximately 8 months before TLMC 10.
Oh, that's so soon.
I got very disinterested as he did not explain anything at all, and I got confused. And then 2 months later, I think I forgot what it was. I was watching a game of Odyssey, and for some reason I was like, I want to try making something like that. And I opened up the editor, or he had everything downloaded, and just started making a map. And after trial and error, I made a map. And a streamer I was watching, I'm not going to list his name just because.
That's fine.
But I got him to play the map, and I was brought into the Mappers Discord that way. And for 5 months, I forgot how long exactly, I was making maps. I didn't really get good. My maps weren't great, but they were like playable. And then I was pretty competitive about that, and I submitted to TLMC 10. I didn't make it to the finalists, and well, my maps weren't up to quality as the others. And then right as TLMC 10 ended, I started working on Ancient Temple, which is now a Temple Overgrowth.
That's legit. I think that's a pretty recent history to jump into map making, and then suddenly your map has made it at least to the finalist level of TLMC.
Yes, pretty surprisingly quick, but I learn and I master pretty fast.
Well, that's good. So I guess before we jump into each individual map, someone had asked in the chat, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give someone who is looking to get into the map making community? I'll ask anyone can start off.
I will start off with this. Generally, my first advice will be just to take a map you like the most and just try to mimic it. Maybe make some differences and whatnot. This is something that I think Avets told me this, and I tried remaking Abyssal. Oh God, that was a nightmare. I'm not going to go to how bad. And then I eventually, which led me down to basically making Temple full overgrowth what it is now by trying to remake Blackpink in a way it was, and it taught me quite a lot. And another thing for decorations, just if you see a decoration style, try to make your own flair of it. But you have to keep stuff in mind where you can't have too big structures everywhere, you obscure air units, and you just can't have air blockers everywhere either. Otherwise, you're going to break unit AI.
All right. Well, who else has a suggestion? Either Solstice or Young Gressler.
Okay. Something I've kind of I've come to kind of do is if I'm doing a layout, it's kind of good not to get like super attached to an idea. Like there have been a number of times where I have an idea in my head of like a specific arrangement of something I want to try in a map, and I'll make several attempts and I'll never be happy with them, and then I just quit and they sit in my folder and they never get brought out again. And I think that if I were to actually try to go to all the effort to actually complete the map and like, you know, pretty it up and all that, that it probably isn't as productive as productive a use of your time as possible.
What would be the more productive? Is to like to just start a new map, like if you've become disinterested to it, like.
Yeah, and then like kind of keep your mind fresh and not be too attached to this idea.
I think there's like a saying for it, like kill your darlings or something like that, or you're supposed to, you know, not get like if an idea isn't working or something, you just like let it go and like go to the next one.
Yeah, and yeah, I would agree with PK Lixie, and I think that what I am saying could kind of add on to that.
All right, then, Young Gressler, what do you got for us?
So I agree with both of them, and I just like to add that if anybody is really wanting to jump into making competitive maps, then the Discord is going to be like your biggest resource, and you want to join up there. And I would also echo that you would want to, just like anything like guitar or singing or anything like that, treat it like an art. You have to keep practicing, not get attached to your work, just like Solstice said, and keep trying and trying and trying. Get feedback from people in the Discord, and that really helped me grow faster. And I think Avax told me it really well. He said that go into current like ladder maps or old ladder maps and see what they did. Look at the distances, look at the wideness of every like nook and cranny, and try and incorporate that into your own map, but not copying, but kind of like this is how everything should look. And that's kind of my advice for new mappers.
Kind of like give yourself like a template to understand the best properties of a good map.
Yes, and try and keep repeating and repeating and repeating. Don't get attached to your work. That was the hardest part for me.
Because it's like I think you brought up a good point. It's an art, right? So it's very easy to fall in love with your art and your idea, I imagine.
Yeah, I fell in love with my first map, and Avax was just telling me, move on. You'll make better maps. And look at me now. I'm making really good maps to get into the finalists. So just got to keep going.
That's legit. All right, before we jump into individual maps, Dave, any other like general random questions you want to hit them up with before we skedaddle?
No, just more thought I'd echo from if you remember from the time that we reviewed the new ladder maps months ago with a few map makers, they were kind of saying the same thing of if you're stuck on something and they keep trying to make small adjustments to make it work.
Yeah,
like they're running into a problem, and they're like, ultimately you can't make tiny adjustments and fix it. You have to just scrap it and do something else. Like,
yeah, I remember that.
It doesn't work. They said just move on. So that seems to be a universal thing in that community, I guess.
Yeah, not to like try to make the map work for the idea.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we pull up one of the maps? Tara, which map do you have for us as one of the first maps, or does it matter? Okay, let's jump into Port Alexander. That name was the first thing that jumped into my mind. So let's jump into Port Alexander. So this map, if my notes serve me correctly, is a macro map. And the points are Port Alexander is the largest of the macro maps with a 46-second rush time between naturals. For all their distances, the main bases are very vulnerable to air attacks should units be able to skirt the edges of the maps. That's the little TLMC. All right, so let's take a look here at Port Alexander. Anything you want to like let us know about general things that young Gressler about Port Alexander?
I just want to say that I'm gonna sound hypocritical, but this is one of the maps that I did not want to give up, and it has seen a lot of changes, textural wise and like layout wise. So this is the oddball. This is one I wouldn't let go because the name. I really love the name. It really catches people's attention.
What's one of your favorite aspects of this map that people may or may not have noticed?
If I had to say like two things, probably the texturing, and I've heard people giving feedback about how it's an eyesore sometimes, and it
I really like it.
It looks like I really like it, but it intentionally looks like it's a bunch of junk left over. It strikes you as like a dead old port.
Yeah, and
that was the intention.
Yeah, and like I said, AVAX was the one that originally did this texturing, and I don't know. I think there's a TLMC or not a. There's a TL thread with the old look that I did, and it was nothing like this.
What is that hole? Is that a hole?
Yeah, that's a G-Dad.
Okay.
One. For the layout wise, I was trying to go for, I think this is probably one of my earlier maps that I've worked on, so I was still trying to experiment with different styles of naturals, and I've never done one where it goes into double ramps down, so I wanted to try that. And this one I really liked because it felt like it was one of those maps where it felt unique but also different, if you kind of get what I'm trying to say. And I don't know, this map went through so much changes now that it's hard to say. Like, I just probably like the process of just creating this map is what I really like about this map.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. I like this double ramp down.
I was gonna ask you, do you think of any? I can't think of any maps right off the top of my head that had double ramps coming down from the natural.
From the natural, not really. Especially directly into two other bases, with then another base. Like, it's interesting how your main is high, your natural's down one level, and then your next three bases are down yet another level. And they're almost like quite vulnerable, and yet they're compressed, so they shouldn't be that.
Well, that means like your bases could fold like dominoes if someone drops or gets in the right place, right? So that's what comes to my mind, is that you might see some interesting situations where if someone hits the natural, even though there's a third and fourth, you can just split up and cut into someone's base really deep.
I think I've been watching the tournament, and there's a little bit of changes that I'm thinking right now. It's concerning those fourth bases down at the bottom. I think most players are having trouble with it being too open, so I might have to fix that. In a different version, I think the third base that was closest to the main had trees in front of it, but I heard from a few map makers that it was kind of choky and not really needed, but it might need something down at that one or the other farther third, the linear third. So
I like. So you said it's gone through a lot of changes. So this is seen a lot of revisions and a bit of facelift and brought back up and around. What was one of the, I guess the key things that, or major things that you changed about this map that made it more viable this time around?
So, the fourth base that's in front of the two ramps, it used to not be there, and it used to be kind of on a high ground. So there was high ground above that third, is why there's kind of an empty space there right now. That has been changed. Also, just the textures in general, I feel like that was just a big change. It really, put the map out there and really made it unique. Because I personally never have seen somebody do like a port style map, port style concept. So I felt like that was something unique about it also.
You're like, we need to have this type of map. This map is required in our rotations. We need it.
Yeah, and just to say again that, I really was looking for that old Brood War feel too, and I think Avex did a great job with the texturing. It looks sort of Brood War-ish.
I like it. It's gritty and dirty. It's a gritty.
Yeah, definitely. It has that look to it. It also looks. It looks like a map designed by a person that hates Reapers.
What?
There's almost nowhere for a Reaper to jump.
Oh.
Was that a consideration at all? Like in the main, there would only be a very small area that it can get in and out, and it's right through the natural. And then there's almost every other cliff is either covered by water, which isn't a gap, or it's covered by trees, which I assume you can't jump over. Or
yeah. So initially when I was making the map, I wasn't really thinking about stuff like that because this is, like I said, one of my earlier maps. So now I keep those in mind, and my new map has a little Reaper cliff. But it's funny that you mentioned that I hate Reapers because I am a Terran player. So the only reason
self-hating Terran player.
Yeah, the only reason why I would hate Reapers is TBT, and I think when I was making the map, actually, if I'm remembering correctly, when it was being made, the 3 racks Reaper was very standard in TBT, so a lot of people were straying away from giving Reapers easy opportunities to get into main bases for not only TBT but TVZ, because that's kind of in the back of your head is, okay, if I put this Reaper cliff here, is it going to annoy players to the point where they're gonna, get on Twitter and say this map is really bad? Because I've experienced that with Defender's Landing. People, it's funny because Todd has said that he's like, whoever made this map, I just want to talk to them sternly or something. And I'm like, hey, it was one of my first maps. Sorry, I wasn't expecting Blizzard to be like one of the greatest maps ever.
Does that ever I guess that must be it's a blessing and a curse when Blizzard puts your map into the ladder and you're like, you get that exposure. Because on one end you get that exposure, on the other hand you're exposed. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's room for criticism, and that's why when people say, what's one of the things you want to do as a new mapper is kind of not get attached to your work and just kind of shrug it off and say, it's just one person, it's just noise. I make better maps now, so it's not really, for me, any concern what people say anymore. It's kind of just just wait until the next round or the next TLMC and you'll see something better.
I think which mapper was it from our last episode that was just I troll people purposely? What was the map? Which map maker do you remember?
I remember someone saying that, and I forget.
He's like, I just troll. He's like, I just troll. He's like, I just troll people purposely.
Something tells me it had to have been the maker of Redshift, but
it was the maker of Redshift,
wasn't it? But
I think it was the maker of Redshift, where he was because we asked him about why was it all to the left or why was it all on to the one side, and he was like, just because. Yeah, so yeah, let's go. Well, let's jump into Cyber Force. But before we leave off of Port Alexander, I wanted to mention that does things like cannon rushes and does that like after players like Haas doing all sorts of intense and weird scenarios come into play when you design your maps?
So for me personally, I try and understand and look at what is being played right now in the modern game and see kind of the tripwires and stuff like that to avoid, such as like the Reaper cliffs. If Reapers are really good right now, maybe not put in a Reaper cliff. Make sure the mineral lines are not Liberator, abusable or cannon abusable, stuff like that. But as a young mapper or some sort of like beginner mapper, you don't really think about those things. So for Port Alexander, it was not in my head because I was still very, very beginning at that point.
And I open up to the other two the other two finalists here. I'm curious to know if that is something that you guys consider when you make your maps as well.
I will often look at the natural, and I'll kind of try to find ways to just kind of prevent like super abusive situations. But I also try to do it in such a way that it doesn't completely limit a Reaper's mobility. So there's kind of a little bit of a trade-off there. Sometimes what you do to kind of deter cannons or whatever will kind of hinder that aspect as well.
So if you deter one, you may open it up to another.
Yeah. Are there certain set rules like people have in mind that are like the choke at the natural must be blockable by 3 buildings or less, or like the rush distance must be a minimum this, or or things like you mentioned, like there cannot be a place where a Liberator can park outside without being hit or something. Are there like hard and fast rules that like the community is aware of that just you can't really violate?
Generally, these are the hidden rules of map making. They don't directly tell you some, but they expect you to know some. Mm-hmm. For example, you can't have a siege tank that's able to siege a Zerg's hatchery from a 3rd location. That is just a plain no.
Right. Because
you could just sit there and they can't get to you because it's being blocked and their hatchery is going to go down. I'm still iffy if I can hit a little bit of the mineral lines. It doesn't matter if it hits like 1 or 2, but of the mineral patches, that's barely anything because you're not getting much value besides probably a drone. But for other things, for like Liberators, that's like, because Liberator just ruins originality a lot because Librange, I constantly forget about that when I make my map. I'm like going like, oh God, I have to make this 3rd like this when I want it a lot more like this, and you're making it this annoying. And with a lot of my order maps where they weren't as close as the corner, I was actually directly explained that a Liberator could just siege up in the corner, top left corner with Librange and cannot be touched. And I stopped that now. I made sure it can be touched, and if not, I just make the room behind her even smaller. So if a Liberator is back there, it can get shot by Queens, Marines, and anything that has range. Mm-hmm. And throughout the map, it's just basic stuff where you can't have a gigantic choke that's just too big, or you can't have just chokes everywhere that are so small that just Terran can abuse it, and you can't just have a direct, massively open area because Zerg can abuse it, or other simple, small things that they don't directly tell you, but they expect you to know.
They being like the other map breakers, or like Blizzard?
Blizzard, generally. No. Other map makers will probably point it out.
Yeah. Makes sense. Stuff that's become so standard. Things like plates at the bottom of a ramp. No one can make a map that doesn't have them.
Everyone forgets from time to time.
Yeah, I assume.
I'm thinking
they're forced to put it in or something, but.
And if it's forgot there, they'll either, I'm not sure, they'll probably put it in for you if you've forgotten, but it's just one of those things where I'm just like, did I cost a map because I forgot a plate at the bottom ramp? Because that's like 4 of my submissions right there.
I feel like when it goes to the final stages, Blizzard will just pop it in. They'll be like, okay, well.
during the final phase, you'll probably put it in because you remembered it by now, or it was pointed out by everyone. It's like,
yeah, the internet will find it and bring it to justice.
The internet is very good at finding flaws in things
and pointing it out and making it really big.
Yeah, that is the internet's number 2 purpose.
Okay, so why don't we jump into Kairos Junction and let's take Kairos Junction a look. Mr. Terra, take us in. All right, Solstice, this is your map. What do you want to? Is there any like general things you want to tell us about Kairos Junction?
I think something I noticed after I made the map is that it actually looks remarkably similar to abiogenesis, but it's bigger. And it wasn't intentional, but I guess that's how it ended up. And
when did you notice that? Did you notice that like very recently? You're like, oh wait.
I think I noticed it was after I completed the map, and I was like, oh, that looks a lot like abiogenesis. And oh, let's see, where is it going with this?
Well, is that when that happens? Is that just mainly because you've studied so many maps and that influence just sort of comes in, or how do you think it could have came to that be so similar to abiogenesis?
I think abiogenesis is already in the ladder, so, and I also posted the map image to Reddit, and there was somebody that noted that, and it was just like, oh.
We require more minerals.
I'd say that with the layout in general, it pretty much became the way it is from start to finish. It hasn't really had a whole lot of iteration. It was basically all done in one sitting.
Oh wow!
And
how long did that take in like one sitting?
I forgot for this specific instance, but it kind of, I mean, I won't say I finished the aesthetics immediately in one sitting, but like the layout in general was done. I kind of struggled with the outer areas for a while to make something that I liked. And I guess that maybe I just subconsciously kind of drew abiogenesis out of, drew it in, and I didn't really realize it.
So this is actually kind of a question not only just to you, Solstice, but to everyone. Like, how much time do you guys generally spend on your maps in terms of hours?
For me, honestly, it depends on my mood. For maximum, I'll probably spend 6 hours, and 2 of those hours will be staring at a blank template going, can I do this layout? Probably. But it also depends on what I'm like wanting to do. For example, as of lately, I've been trying to make team maps, and I've been for layout I'm currently working on, which is it's one of the things that not even Blizzard would think of. But it's generally, I've been thinking about it for more than a day. I messed around in the editor for more than a day also while I was thinking about it, and then I actually bothered to do it for 3-4 hours until I got what I want. And for my other maps like Cyber Forest, it took me 2 hours to make one half of the map, which was the outer edge, and the middle took another hour because it went through many redesigns. Because like, do I want this? No, it makes the middle too open, or it makes it so it's not as fluid as I want it to be.
Okay, so it's about, on average, 6 hours you spend on it.
Yes.
What about yourself, young wrestler?
So depending on the map, it takes either from maybe, I think my fastest I've done is like 3 hours for a complete layout, but not like texturing, to I could spend like a whole day just messing around with one layout and just trying to make it work and end up not making it work out at all. So it depends on kind of the mood I want to do, and on the mood I'm in, and kind of just how how much I want to put in. And usually when I see an announcement like the Team Look Good contest, that's when the 24 hours start, because I just want to get as many map submissions as possible. So that's kind of my process.
Solstice?
I often try to do stuff in one sitting if I have enough time. And I'd say that from start to finish, if you include aesthetics, it's always generally at least several hours. Sometimes the aesthetic I go for is a lot lighter. Well, rarely. And then it only takes like I don't know, 3 to 4 hours. But I often go really overboard with the doodad count. And I always end up having to spend another hour trimming everything down after I've like filled the entire thing with doodads. There's one map, and it wasn't even a big map, and it had like, it had 4,500 doodads on it. And for reference, Abyssal Reef has like 2.2 thousand doodads.
So you like pretty much doubled Abyssal Reef's
Yeah,
doodad count.
I mean, it was largely a consequence of me just having the doodads way too dense for what was good. But yeah, it is something I deal with all the time, where I just go overboard.
So, is there a feature of this particular map that like you think most people haven't noticed or that you're particularly proud of?
There is the rocks.
I want
I
to
kind of like.
I want to point out too that on stream we're currently seeing Cyber Forest, not Kairos Junction, by the way.
Oh.
So I think we ended up in the wrong one. But
Way to go, Tara.
Yeah, but I do want to talk about the rocks when we do have a video of Kairos up, because I think that is the coolest part.
Okay, well, we're gonna switch maps then.
But since we've got Cyber up, we might as well talk about some of the features here, and then we'll switch back into Kairos. Okay. I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess since it's up, we might as well.
Yeah.
Way to go, Tara.
So this one, the Cyber Forest, almost it doesn't look like it, and it certainly has a lot of design differences, but it reminds me a little of Dreamcatcher in the way that the bases, all your bases are kind of like linearly squished to one corner, and then there's a lot of barriers through the middle, which you can open up and end up with a very short distance, but initially it's not a short distance. And I kind of like that design.
Well, so that PK, that's definitely for you. And I guess we should have totally swapped it around, but
yeah.
You know what? We'll do another game on this back later. Well, let's go to Kairos.
Okay.
We'll go to Kairos since we were already. Oh, whether or not Tara's gonna have these Zerglings run around.
I don't know what Tara's doing.
All right, see. Okay, Solstice, tell us though, before we get back into it, favorite part of your map.
Let's see. We were saying something
rocks,
about the rocks. Yeah. So that was actually probably the only iteration, like at least major iteration.
Kairos. Yeah. This is like, and I don't think this is one feature I don't think we've seen anywhere before, but it's a really good idea. So you've got, and we'll see when we jump in here, but you've got rocks that not only block off a path, but the end of the rocks open up. If you take them down, they would open up a back path to one of the bases, like right behind the mineral line, which is really interesting.
I like that idea. I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's you'll see it when we jump in here, but it's
here we are.
Interesting design, and there's room behind that mineral line to actually have a small army at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how do these rocks work? So when they break,
yeah, that's them, I think. Yeah, no, up towards the middle. Yeah, well, you were anyway. I know we're on the delay, but yeah, they're here where they laterally, like they kind of horizontally go into this base, breaking kind of a crescent of rock, or like cliff or whatever. So if these were taken down, it would open up a brand new path into the base they're connected to.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's a little bit of it's like it opens up two paths in a way.
Yeah.
There's something I was kind of struggling with was map flow. So going from the third to an area that was towards the top side of the map was a bit difficult, because you either had to go through the center entirely, go all the way into the center, or you had to backtrack all the way through that path right outside your natural. So I wanted to add that little path there so that you could kind of get to that top side of the map a little bit more comfortably. The mineral line is kind of awkward, but I think that was something that's kind of the way it is because I was a bit stubborn with it. But I'm already working on some changes for the iteration phase, and that mineral line is gonna get reoriented, and it's gonna be less awkward. So you don't have to walk through the mineral field, through the middle of it. So, and I think the base is gonna be a lot more viable. But of course, the path remains the same.
Makes sense. It's a pretty cool innovation. I don't think we've seen that use of rocks at all, where it's a double.
I wanted to give incentive for not only an attacker but also a defender to take it down, depending on what they wanted.
Well, that would make sense. When you design these maps, obviously there's never. Do you ever? And it opens up to other map makers as well. Do you ever try to affect the meta with your maps in any way, in terms of what you'd like people to do more of or less of?
We require more.
I wouldn't say I think about it a whole lot, but I know that there are mappers that do want to affect the meta in a more deliberate sense, but I'm not sure if that's. I mean, it might make it so that Blizzard might not quite like their maps as much, but it's something that some mappers are kind of keen to.
Young Wrestler or PK, do you guys ever try to affect the meta with your maps?
I myself dreamed of affecting the meta, but with what I'm doing now, I'm just kind of taking results of what I see from pro players and more high-end stuff, and applying those situations to my maps to make sure I can keep a more fluid motion meta, and eventually hope I can slowly transfer it to push stuff for making the servers a bit parser, so the maps don't have to be so big or have so many mineral lines and whatnot.
What about yourself, Young?
The one time that I tried to influence the meta was Defender's Landing, and I did not like the result of that. Two entrances into naturals is a big meme in the Discord. If you try and post one of those in the Discord, Avex will make sure to send you some angry emojis and angry thoughts about how you should never put two entrances into the natural. But I think for me personally, I've been trying to work on defining my standard layouts and making sure that I can do those correctly. And I think I'm getting to the point where I can start trying to experiment with trying to change the meta, and that's kind of what you want to do as an early mapper too, is try and get good at making standard maps. Once you're good at that, then you can kind of build off of standard maps and make your own little flavor of trying to change the meta.
Fair enough. All right, legit.
We require more minerals.
Anything else on your map while we're here? Solstice.
I'm not sure if I have anything else that I feel a need to really talk about.
No worries. We already had you talk a bit, and we were already on the wrong map, so it's
Yeah.
No, it's fine. So why don't we round this off and jump into the last map that we already played, but we'll play again just for the purposes of the interviewing. Tara, let this NPC destroy you or just exit, and we will jump into the proper map, which was Cyber Forest. Cyber Forest, which is PK's map. Oh, while Cyber Forest is loading up, Solstice, how'd you come up with the name Kairos Junction?
I don't know. My the way I name things is kind of lame. I just kind of try to. I don't know. I don't really remember specifically, but I know it involved looking in a thesaurus. I don't know lots of fancy words, but when you can just look up the thesaurus, you can kind of pick out words that look exotic or whatever.
So is Kairos is that an actual real word, or like is that a synonym for something else, or is that?
It's a Greek word.
Ooh.
Which I guess coincidentally, I kind of went with almost like a kind of mosaic type aesthetic in the high ground. It's a coincidence.
Oh, okay. You should just went with it. Like I told you.
That's how it worked out.
I would have totally went to town and be like, yeah, I pre-planned it. Greek name, Greek tiles. I'm actually look up Kairos. I'm curious what
it means. In Greek, it means the right, critical, or opportune moment.
Oh, wow.
So the Kairos junction would be the right place at the right time.
Huh.
So pretend that's why you named it that.
I would. That's really cool. Might use it for other things.
That's cool. Funny because I thought it sounded like Chronos, but that's why it's kind of Kairos is Chronos merged with like
time,
the right time or the opportune time.
So well, you're like, I don't know any fancy words. You named it a pretty fancy name.
Yeah, Kairos is also a big charity.
That was like first in the Google searches, I noticed.
Yeah.
So this is you, PK. Tell us about this map.
Well, Cyber Forest, my second iteration of the Blackpink general layout, main, not third, based on the high ground in a weird triangle foundation, which is standardized. It's the most standard I can get without trying to make a macro map, which always ends in disaster. But when I was making this map, I didn't have a name for it at the time. In fact, at the time, I was thinking of a more complex name, which, if I would try to pronounce my original name version of it, it would sound like I'm speaking like a Murloc from World of Warcraft, so let's not go there. But throughout making the map, I was throwing around ideas when I was making the layout, especially around the main not third, where I was like, do I add in a Reaper Cliff? Do I not add in a Reaper Cliff? And, well, mention it later, I also at the time been trying to make maps without a Reaper Cliff, as even though I'm a Terran main, I do somewhat play all races, and I get real annoyed by Reapers, especially as a Terran. And I'm like, well, Acid Plant is a map I didn't really like because the third felt unnaturally far. But I now do like it by the fact that you don't need a Reaper Cliff into the main to scout it. And my maps I've just been making where you don't need a Reaper Cliff into the main, but in the natural, there's probably a small cliff that's not noticed by the decoration because I'm apparently good at making stuff unnoticeable. But for this map, for example, behind the triangle third, by the left Vespine geyser, there's a small access way into natural, which you can use to get into the main for a extra scout if needed.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, seems pretty. That's interesting. I like how you went in ahead and did that. That's interesting. No.
Another thing I want to add on is that I'm a real person that loves fluid aggression, which you can see in middle where it's very fluid when you move around. It's a bit too fluid because I've been seeing Bile versus Mech, and Bile's been abusing it pretty well, but what can you do? I didn't really test every matchup. I just envisioned this happening here and this happening here. And with the middle, I'm looking at a picture right now that I pulled up. I have little pods in the middle that has some decoration in between, so small units can't walk in between. But I have that there so Zerg can't just completely surround a mech army in it.
Oh, okay.
Because originally it was too big, and I added those before I actually started fully decorating the map, as I saw Zerg could have had a stronger advantage on the map otherwise.
That's sort of like meta influence in kind of weird, like a soft kind of way.
Yeah, these minor blockers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. These little blockers.
Yeah, we're seeing that with the Reapers now.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's good. I like the thought pattern behind that.
Another thing is that around a 4th, 5th, 6th location, depending on how you expand, this map only goes up to 6 spaces per player generally. But around there's a small high ground that has 3 ramps, and the smaller ramp is like, this is if you're moving around and whatnot. It's good for siege tanks and whatnot. I put that there over just leaving that as flat ground, as it allows more interesting moments. It also allows you to be able to siege more. And for Zerg, it has a small Zergling path because apparently judges have a boner for that.
Is that something that comes into play for, I guess, all of you guys, that you guys know ahead of time what sort of things the judges in the first phase or whatever love or like or more likely to do, and you kind of game the system in some regards for your map? Or do you guys just put it on your mind?
For me personally, I would say texture-wise, we kind of know what judges have been picking. So like the general rule is everybody wants to make their cute beach maps or their very colorful maps, and that will get the judges' attention. But as you've seen with these like past few TLMCs with these new people that pop up, you never know what the judges really want layout wise, so that makes it really interesting, because sometimes you just are like, this could be the best map ever, and then somebody else gets in and you're like, oh, that's what the judges want. And that's pretty much highlighted with, I think, the challenges, because I submitted maps for the challenges where I put a few turrets when most of the challenge maps seemed like they wanted a lot of turrets. So that's kind of my thought process about the judges' thoughts on maps.
Can you briefly explain for people that don't know how the challenges work? Like, do they give you a set, like, this is the sort of thing we're looking for, make this? Or, like, is there something they have in mind, or how do those work?
This TLMC, the challenges came out. Originally it was standard, macro, rush, experimental, and because experimental just never really changed. The ideas were always the same or done before, or not really unique, or just completely game breaking that nobody will play on the map unless you get Redshift for his original name, which basically it was a punny face map where it's just got as everyone's like, what? Generally it's just that category was retired, and they retired the rush category as well because it wasn't really a good category. You just get super small standard maps in and whatnot, and I didn't expect it to get retired. So one of my strongest and my only best rush map I'll ever make, it kind of got just slapped directly out of the possibility of being a finalist because of it. And generally the challenges for this TLMC was close by air, far by ground. It has to be an aggressive map, or should be an aggressive map. And then because RMT's Renegade missile turrets came out, which, if I can express my opinion on, are one of the most useless things. So I was trying to make a map that doesn't need Zelnaga, there we go, I almost said it incorrectly. Zelnaga Tower work when it doesn't need it. Generally, it's those simple, small things that get me annoyed, but it's like, well, now I'm going to be making 2 maps with this. I'm not going to go overkill, and then I see the finalists, and one map that doesn't use like a million turrets gets in. I'm like, okay, I guess that map meet my expectation, but apparently they're like, yes, let's have maps that if you don't watch your units for every second, it deletes your units.
So the challenge is just generally very like weird and wacky. Makes it to the next level.
It wasn't really challenging for the aggressive maps. The most challenging part was making the map actually fit the close by air without trying to make the nat close. But even then, there's some cases Sejong style maps which their nats are close, and it's like, well, you're meeting the expectation. That's at least. And one of the maps with that style got in. It's like, I'm not much of a fan of the map due to how it looks, but at least it's good. It's not terrible. It actually fits the challenge pretty well. And then there's other maps that just kind of annoy me. Like, for example, Stasis was like, I really like the map. The air blockers kind of annoy me, but I really like the map. But the only thing that annoys me is the path between the naturals. But, you know, which is one of the things like, that's a Ling run by path and also a very good sieging position, but simple problems that can be fixed later on.
So here's a question for everybody in terms of maps. So and we're going to round off this list part of this segment just shortly, but is there a map that got picked in the finalists that you like other than your own map?
For me, that'll be Year Zero. When I saw the map, well, I saw it before, but I was like, any TLMC comes up, that map is the finalist, guaranteed. It's too good. It's going to be in the top 5 in my predictions.
What about yourself, young Grustler? And
so I would say probably this is going to be hard. Year Zero, I like, and I also liked King's Cove and Automation, or the Auto
Automaton.
Yeah, Automaton. It's getting late. If I had to choose one, I'd probably say Autonomon or
Automaton.
Automaton, because the name, and I like the aesthetic. It looks very nitty and gritty, and I like sort of like that. I'm not really a big fan of the bright colors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'd have to say I share these opinions. Year Zero, and is like really good. I love that one. The aesthetic is really, really unique. I haven't seen anything like it before. And I also love Automaton, but since I can't remember any of the other ones, like at least that stand out that I really like, I guess there aren't any others that I really like. I'll have to say that I'm not I wasn't super elated about very many of the finalists.
I noticed that was a common thing, a thread for some people. I don't know if that was just general hype or a lack of hype, but I think one of the first posts I saw on Team Liquid was someone was like, what are these maps? But
yeah, there was some I kind of felt like I got snubbed.
It felt like a lot of the maps, and me and Cindy are Sidikin the Bard. Me and him joke a lot about how Avax didn't get a lot of his maps in, and we were surprised because he usually gets at least 2 in, or 3, or even all of his maps in, and that was really surprising. And then I'm surprised also myself that I got more than 1 map, but I'd say most of the maps they're pretty well polished. There was no, I think the last TLMC, what was the map name? The one by it was that short rush distance map. That one was not really textured at all. There was none of those maps in this TLMC. So
I forget what it was called. The one that got renamed and redone. The Cape Rigus something. I don't know. I forgot what the name was.
Can't remember anything like me.
I don't remember what it was called before, but yeah, it was like everybody was surprised when that was announced as a finalist.
Well, I imagine that sometimes, because obviously you guys have your own internal judges within the map making community, who you guys have seen a lot of maps, so you're could probably be hypercritical sometimes, I imagine, of some of the finalists, or even maybe some of the judging criteria. So
Yeah, mappers are probably among the hardest on maps that there are.
Imagine. Do you guys know ahead of time by any chance who the judges are going to be, or do you kind of submit and then find out?
Normally they don't say that, but in this last TLMC, they it wasn't before the finalists were announced, but after the finalists were announced, they specified who all was in the judging process.
Yeah.
Is that different? Do they normally not say that?
I don't think they've done that before, where they shouted out to all of them.
Because I noticed Juggernaut, Jason, Upper Tree, TLL, Snoot, and Van Tak were the judges for this TLM.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's any way to know ahead of time to kind of.
So you can bribe them? Is that what you want to do, Dave?
You could either bribe them or at least make something that's in their favor.
I just wanted to add, I think this time they did it, and then in the past, the other big map makers would ask, who is the judges? This is an outrage when they saw like maps that they didn't like. So they would be like, who is judging this? And then I think one of the Team Liquid people would be like, these are the people, go complain to them, stop complaining to me. It wasn't my judging. So it was always behind closed doors, but now they seem to kind of let everybody see who judged. And then I think the big problem.
I see.
Yeah, now the big problem is everybody saying, "Where's the Protoss representation?" I don't.
Oh man, Jesus! You can't win. You can't win though. It's true. There isn't any Protoss. It's Zerg and Terrans. It's just Zerg and Terrans.
Yeah. So TLO maybe still counts from like 8 years ago.
And Uventak, who I don't know at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
He could be Protoss.
He's the map maker, so
that makes sense. That's I was gonna ask that. Like I'm almost surprised that the judging isn't more map maker heavy, like that it's some of your own.
I imagine there should be representation of like all the whole. But I guess it's whoever volunteers, really, right? It's like whoever volunteers to be a map maker. I mean, judge.
And AVAX has said, I think last TLMC that he might have judged this one, so. And I've also been seeing in the Discord that people want to do some sort of like community where the map makers in the Discord can kind of vote for their favorites as judges and then submit that to the judges and say, these are the ones that we think are high quality maps. You should take a look at these and consider
like almost like a reference, like a recommendation or a reference.
Exactly. I mean, they do that in a lot of sports, right? There's like the stuff.
Or like cooking or like food.
People voted in by like the press, and then people voted in by the players in the league, like the MVP and then the MVP according to players, and they're often different.
Yeah.
So, there should be like map makers according to players and map makers according to map makers.
All right. So I think, Dave, if you don't have anything to round it off with here, we'll start to wrap up our show. But first, actually, I should give you an opportunity to say something before I move this on. No? All right. Cool beans, cool beans, cool beans, cool beans. All right, boys and girls, we're going to thank first our guests. You guys, thank you so much for coming out and talking to us about your maps. Super wish you much luck onto the next round of the final of the TLMC. And I'm always happy to have map makers and give us the perspective. Because a lot of times you'll have people just complain and bitch online and, you don't know, you don't know like why or rhyme or reasons on why something's done. So I'm glad to have a chance to have you guys give us your insight.
Yeah, this is great.
Perfect.
It's great to come.
Absolutely. So you guys just hang on. So make sure you guys don't jump out of the call because you'll kill our cameras. Last thing before we have a special thing, our last segment to give you guys. I'm curious to see how it goes. So we got a challenge. We got a StarCraft challenge. Let's see how many of you can get it. Tara, roll the clip.